I heard my own son Andre call me dead weight, and tell his wife Vanessa I was useless because I was finally broke. Those words, they humiliated me in a way you can't even imagine. The very next second, I knew. They were about to learn the hard way who the real source of everything they had was. I canceled it all. But what happened after that was the coldest, sweetest revenge of my life. But before we keep going, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. And hey, don't forget to drop a like and hit that subscribe button. It really helps out a lot. The worst part of it wasn't the sound of my own son's voice, thick with contempt. It was the laughter that followed, Vanessa's brittle, self-satisfied chuckle, sealing the verbal insult like a tombstone. You spend 54 years, half of them dedicated to raising a kind, generous man, and in one careless afternoon, you discover you raised a parasite. I had always been overly generous, I confess. After my husband, Robert, passed 5 years ago, I became the sole financial pillar. Robert left me comfortable, very comfortable, and I used that comfort to cushion Andre and Vanessa. They lived a lifestyle in downtown Toronto that his struggling real estate career and her flaky social media influencer deals could never, ever afford. I paid the mortgage, it was in my name, though they called it their house. I covered the hefty credit card bills, and I even funded Vanessa's brand trips. It was love, I told myself. It was keeping my family close. But deep down, I always suspected the conditionality of their affection. So, 2 weeks ago, I decided to test them. I began dialing back the monthly allowance I slipped Andre, a 6-figure sum, mind you, claiming I was experiencing unexpected liquidity issues. It was a lie, of course, a little white lie to see if the calls would continue, if the weekend visits would still be filled with genuine warmth rather than subtle requests for funds. The calls didn't stop, but the warmth turned to a definite chill. That afternoon, I drove to their house, the one I paid for, unannounced. I had a severe headache and just wanted a cup of my favorite chamomile tea that I knew they stocked for me. Their maid, who I also paid, let me in and mentioned they were in the conservatory. As I walked past the study, I heard them, their voices cutting through the thick silence of the expensive, empty house. "It's about time she's finally broke," Andre scoffed. "I told you that portfolio was too aggressive." "I just worry about the Amex Black," Vanessa whined, sounding less concerned about me and more about her next shopping spree. "If we have to put things on my card, my followers will notice the budget brands." Then came the knife twist, the words that turned my blood to ice water. "Relax, babe," Andre said, sounding dismissive. "If she's actually run out of money, she's useless to us anyway. She's dead weight. We don't need her pity or her constant fussing. Useless. Dead weight. My son. My own flesh and blood." The tears didn't come. Instead, an arctic calm settled over me, a peace I hadn't felt since before Robert died. I didn't need their pity either. I needed justice. I needed them to feel the sheer, gut-wrenching terror of being truly useless, of being truly broke. I backed away silently, my headache forgotten, replaced by a steely focus. I returned to my own, much more modest home, walked past the framed photograph of Andre from his college graduation, and sat down at my desk. I looked at the dark wood, the solid objects, and realized the immense power I still held. They thought my money had run out. They didn't realize they had run out of my money. I picked up my phone and opened my contact list. My first call was to Calvin, my lawyer. I needed to move fast, surgically, and without emotion. Andre and Vanessa were about to learn that their mother wasn't useless. She was calculating. "Calvin," I said, my voice steady, though I felt my heart beating a military rhythm against my ribs. "I need you to prepare the legal notices immediately. We are executing the termination clauses on all joint accounts and credit lines. I also need to verify the paperwork regarding the family business shares, the 51% reversion clause, effective immediately." This was only the beginning. It felt like flipping a switch on a disaster only they would endure. They had no idea how deeply submerged they were in my control. They saw the monthly transfers, the paid bills, and assumed it was a general flow of wealth. They didn't see the architecture. I started by detailing everything for Calvin. The first and easiest step was the credit cards. I had 4 high-limit cards issued in my name, with Andre and Vanessa as authorized users. The moment I hung up with Calvin, I called my personal banking manager. I didn't just cancel the cards. I severed the entire line of credit associated with those accounts. My manager, bless her professionalism, simply noted that I was restructuring my liabilities. The next step was the house. They were so proud of their starter home in a luxury neighborhood. Andre would often brag to his friends about his equity. What he didn't know, or chose to ignore in the endless paperwork I handled, was that after Robert passed, I used an inheritance loophole and paid the mortgage off completely, placing it under a legal entity I controlled. I was essentially their sole creditor, holding the deed in escrow until a distant date. This meant I didn't need a bank's permission to foreclose. I just needed Calvin to draft the notice of non-payment of the last 6 months of escrow rent, which I had, conveniently, decided not to pay to myself. It was the legal equivalent of a silent, devastating tidal wave. But the final piece was the most painful for me, yet essential for the vengeance. It involved the family's cottage, a small but stunning property in the Hamptons. Robert and I bought it when Andre was little. It was meant to be a legacy, a place for future generations. Andre and Vanessa spent every summer there, and the rest of the year, the rent from short-term luxury leases paid directly into Vanessa's personal account, her supposed income. I made the cold decision. I was selling the property immediately to cover my own fictitious liquidity issues. I had a cash buyer ready, another contingency I'd planned years ago. It was cutting off the last real lifeline that gave Vanessa her pretense of self-sufficiency. I signed the listing agreement that night. It felt like selling a piece of my own soul, but the thought of their faces when they realized the true depth of their vulnerability was a stronger motivator than sentiment. I spent the rest of the night going over the company's shares. Robert's company, now a smaller, boutique investment firm, had 51% of its shares under my name, 49% under Andre's. Andre had been acting CEO, largely due to the voting power of my shares, which he assumed he had de facto control over. The reversion clause, buried deep in the trust documents, allowed me to transfer voting rights back at any time if I deemed the company or my assets at risk. I dictated the full legal demand to Calvin over a late-night video call, detailing the immediate transfer of all voting and financial control back to me. Andre's title would instantly become worthless paper. He'd go from CEO to simple minority shareholder overnight. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with the soft pink and orange hues of a new day, I felt exhausted, yet oddly exhilarated. The stage was set. The traps were laid. I was no longer the useless mother. I was the architect of their immediate future. I checked my email one last time before going to sleep. Cliffhanger. The message from the bank manager glowed on the screen. Marjorie, confirming all credit facilities terminated. All credit cards associated with the accounts of Andre and Vanessa have been deactivated. Effective immediately. I slept soundly for the first time in months. The cold determination was a better sedative than any pill. When I woke up, I made my coffee slowly, deliberately waiting for the storm to break. It didn't take long. My phone rang precisely at 10:30 a.m. It was Andre. His tone wasn't pleading or worried. It was sharp, entitled, and irritated. "Mom, what is going on with the platinum card?" he snapped, skipping any form of greeting. I was trying to close the deal on the new Audi, and it was declined. Declined, Mom. Do you know how embarrassing that is? I put on my best performance of confusion and meekness. Oh, Andre dear, that sounds awful. I honestly don't know. The bank has been so difficult since I started consolidating my accounts. You know, since I had to sell the... Forget the details, Mother. Just call them and fix it, he interrupted, his arrogance peaking. I need that commission, and I need the card working by noon. I can't look cheap in front of the dealership manager. It's bad for my brand. His words confirmed everything. He saw the card, and by extension me, as nothing more than a malfunctioning tool he needed to repair. I offered a placating but useless solution. I've tried calling them, dear, but they put me on hold for hours. I'm afraid I'm just too distressed right now to deal with bank politics. Maybe you could use some of that rent money from the cottage to tide you over? Just until I figure out what's wrong. He scoffed again. Tide me over? That money is earmarked, Mom. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. He hung up, dismissing me just as easily as he had the night before. I smiled. The arrogance was magnificent. The rent money he was referring to? It would never materialize. I had signed the final documents for the sale of the cottage earlier this morning. The funds were already securely in my new, private investment portfolio. Next came Vanessa. She didn't call. She texted, a stream of frantic, poorly punctuated messages. Mommy, the Paris event is next week. and the boutique wouldn't let me take the dresses without prepayment. My account is empty. I need the usual $20,000 immediately. The engagement is massive. You're not actually broke, are you? Tell me it's just a bank glitch. I replied to her texts with a single, carefully crafted message. Vanessa, darling, I'm afraid I've been quite unwell lately, and the stress is getting to me. I simply cannot manage anything right now. Perhaps reschedule the trip? I turned off my phone, knowing my performance of frail, useless motherhood was working perfectly. They were floundering, irritated, but still completely oblivious to the deep ocean of trouble they were standing in. They thought they were facing a puddle. They had no idea they were already drowning. A loud, authoritative knock rattled my front door. It wasn't them. I opened it to find a stern-looking man in a dark uniform holding a clipboard. "Marjorie O'Connell?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Mr. Harlan, a process server. I have legal documents pertaining to a David Andre O'Connell. Are you able to accept delivery on his behalf?" I feigned confusion, though my mind was racing. Andre must have signed some frivolous contract recently. "Oh yes, my son. I suppose so." Mr. Harlan handed me a thick envelope and left without another word. I didn't open it immediately. I didn't need to. It was a tangible sign that Andre, despite all my money, still couldn't manage his affairs. It was a reminder of why I needed to proceed with the justice I was orchestrating. Cliffhanger. I placed the envelope containing my son's legal notice on my desk, right beside the signed papers confirming the sale of the Hamptons property. The slow burn was accelerating. The sight of those legal papers, a notice of default on a speculative loan Andre had taken out months ago without telling me, crystallized everything. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the lack of honesty, the lack of responsibility. I used to blame myself for this. When Robert died, he left a hole in my life the size of a planet. My excessive generosity to Andre was my attempt to seal that wound, to ensure my son never felt the absence of a provider, never had to worry. I worried for him so he didn't have to. And look where it got me. A humiliation that finally, mercifully, cured my misplaced maternal guilt. That morning, I met the buyers of the cottage in the office of my new, discreet real estate agent. The property had been sold for a handsome sum, and the funds had already been wired. As I signed the final transfer deeds, I pictured Andre and Vanessa's faces, full of sunshine and laughter, sitting on that deck. It had been their sanctuary, their paradise, where they retreated after a stressful month of pretending to work. Now it was gone. It was a cold transaction, but a necessary amputation. Less than an hour after the closing, my phone lit up. It was Andre, this time with a distinct tremor in his voice. "Mom, listen to me. This is serious. The rental payment didn't come in today. The Hamptons payment. That's Vanessa's entire income stream. Her landlord is calling, threatening to evict her boutique space. Why hasn't it been paid?" I leaned back in my leather chair, taking a slow, deep breath. "Andre, you didn't listen to me yesterday. I told you I was in dire straits. The liquidity issues were real. I had no choice but to liquidate my most easily transferable assets. I sold the cottage, dear. The transaction closed this morning." A long, shocking silence followed. Then an explosion of disbelief. "You sold it? Without telling us? That's our summer home, Mother. Where are we going to stay? What about Vanessa's business?" That money was critical. The money was critical to my debts, Andre. I stated plainly, my voice flat. It was in my name, and I needed the capital. It was a rental property, not a gift. You and Vanessa were simply the most frequent tenants. He couldn't fathom it. The sheer lack of consideration, the unmotherly act of selling their refuge, was too much for his privileged mind to process. He devolved into furious accusations. "You are sabotaging my life. You are doing this on purpose. You are jealous because we were doing so well. You were pretending to do well, Andre," I corrected him calmly. I simply stopped supporting the illusion. The call ended with him screaming. I hung up the phone feeling lighter. They were finally beginning to taste the fear of having to stand on their own 2 feet, realizing that the solid ground they thought they occupied was merely a thick rug laid over a bottomless pit. Cliffhanger, Andre's threat echoed in my mind. "I will take back what is mine. You won't get away with this." I knew his next move would be an attempt to leverage the only substantial asset he knew he possessed, the mortgage-free house he was living in. He had no idea the house was the next bomb in my arsenal. Andre's threats were meaningless bluster, but I respected his predictable trajectory. The house was his status, his supposed triumph, and the biggest chunk of collateral he thought he possessed. I knew he would try to borrow against it, using its paid-off status to secure a large personal loan to replace the money I had cut off. I waited 2 days, listening to the silence of their humiliation. The calls stopped completely. They were scrambling, trying to figure out how to cover basic expenses, how to tell their friends they weren't going to Paris, how to explain the suddenly defunct Amex Black Card. I decided it was time for the next reveal. I called Andre at his office, the desk he used courtesy of the company I owned. "Andre, I heard you tried to secure a second mortgage yesterday," I began, skipping any pleasantries. A gasp on the other end. "How do you know that, Mother?" "That is private. Because, my dear, it would be difficult to secure a loan against a property when I am the primary creditor," I explained, slowly and methodically. "Remember all those papers you signed when I helped you buy the house after Robert passed? I was the bank. I was the underwriter. You haven't made a mortgage payment, not 1 penny, since the day you moved in, because I covered all those payments myself, every month, via a shell corporation that I control. You're in serious breach of contract." His shock was beautiful in its totality. You can't be serious. You own the house? But the papers. The papers stated that the deed would remain in my control until the loan was satisfied. The loan was never satisfied because I kept funding it. It was a failsafe in case you ever disappointed me. I delivered the final blow without raising my voice. "The period of grace is over, Andre. Since you are now in default on your other obligations, the one Mr. Harlan served you with, I am accelerating the payment schedule for this property. You and Vanessa have 30 days to vacate the premises. The house is going on the market immediately." "Mom, you can't," he wailed, his voice breaking. This wasn't anger. This was pure, unadulterated fear. "We have nowhere to go. That's our life. Our home." "No," I corrected him, using the exact words I'd rehearsed in the mirror. "It's my house. You merely resided in it. And now you don't. 30 days. Calvin will be in touch with the formal eviction notice tomorrow." The line went dead. I felt a surge of cold power. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't cursed. I hadn't lost my composure. I had simply shown them the cold, hard reality of the contracts they had dismissed as insignificant paperwork. Later that evening, a text came through from Vanessa, full of venom and threats, no longer hiding her true colors. "Cliffhanger. You think you won? You won't get away with this, Marjorie. I know all your little secrets. I'll expose every dirty thing you've ever done to the family. You'll be the one begging for pity. Don't think I won't do it." Vanessa's threat of exposing my little secrets barely registered. I laughed out loud, a sharp, cold sound that felt foreign in my quiet house. What secrets did I have? I was a widow who had spent 5 years funding her ungrateful children out of love and guilt. My only secret was the depth of my disappointment. I knew she was bluffing, grasping at straws, trying to use shame, the same weapon they had used on me, as a shield. Her next move confirmed my assessment. Instead of calling any media or family members, Vanessa took her desperation to her only audience, her social media followers. She posted a tearful photo, her expensive designer clothes looking pathetic against her genuine misery. The caption screamed about the evil, rich monster of a mother-in-law who was expelling them onto the street because of jealousy. The public outcry was swift, but not in her favor. Her followers, who had watched her flaunt ridiculous wealth for years, were brutal. "Why were you living in your mother-in-law's house? Why did she pay your bills? Get a real job, Vanessa." The humiliation was public and permanent. She deleted the post within the hour, but the screenshots lived forever. While Vanessa dealt with her self-inflicted public shaming, I focused on Andre. This was the final, devastating piece of the financial puzzle: his identity. I called Calvin and confirmed the execution of the share reversion clause. Within the hour, the legal paperwork was filed, removing Andre's voting majority and executive power over Robert's investment firm. He was no longer the CEO. He was a silent, powerless minority shareholder. He had no salary, no authority, and no title. The news hit him like a physical blow. He called me moments after the company's legal team informed him. He wasn't yelling anymore. He was weeping. "Mom, the firm. You took the firm. I can't be the CEO without the voting shares. My clients, my friends, they know. You've ruined my career. You've ruined my name. Everything I worked for. Everything Robert worked for, Andre," I interjected, my voice still devoid of warmth. "And everything I subsidized. You failed to meet the ethical and financial standards required by the trust, which mandated I protect the assets. You proved you couldn't be trusted with an ordinary credit card, let alone a multi-million-dollar company. His voice was a crushed whisper, and for the first time, I heard a sliver of genuine brokenness, not just entitlement. Please, Mother. I don't care about the money anymore. Just tell me why. Why did you do this? I need an explanation. I need to understand why you would destroy your own son. The way he framed it, destroy, was exactly what I needed to hear. He was humbled, his pride utterly shattered. This was the moment for the confrontation, the delivery of the final truth. I will meet you, I told him, finally giving a concession. Tomorrow at the house. Bring Vanessa. I will give you the explanation you're begging for. I hung up, knowing that the confrontation would be the end of my vengeance and the beginning of their bitter education. Cliffhanger. I agreed to the meeting, but I knew my appearance the next day wouldn't be as a mother ready to forgive, but as a judge ready to pass sentence. I arrived at their house, my house, at the appointed time. The place already felt cold and hollow. The maid was gone, the custom lighting was off, and the silence was heavy, disturbed only by the echo of my heels on the expensive marble floor. Andre and Vanessa were waiting in the living room, a stark contrast to their usual pampered appearances. Andre was in crumpled clothes, unshaven, and Vanessa's expensive makeup did little to hide the genuine exhaustion and anxiety beneath her eyes. They looked defeated. They looked, in a word, useless. "Thank you for meeting us, Mother," Andre mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. I just want to know why. Why you hate us so much." I didn't sit down. I stood in the middle of the room, looking at the two people who had stripped me of my dignity. "I don't hate you, Andre. I mourn the man I thought you were. As for why, I am here to give you the exact explanation you asked for." I looked directly at Andre, my eyes unwavering. 3 weeks ago, in your study, I overheard you. You told Vanessa, and I quote, "If she's actually run out of money, she's useless to us anyway. She's dead weight." Do you remember that, Andre? Andre's face drained of color. He started stammering. I was angry. "I didn't mean it, Mom. It was a moment of weakness." "Don't you dare dismiss it as a moment of weakness." I snapped, the only time my voice rose. "It was the truth, Andre. It was the summation of 5 years of your conditional affection. And for that truth, you lost everything." I then proceeded to detail the entire financial illusion I had maintained, listing the numbers with brutal honesty. That $20,000 Vanessa needed for her brand trips? That was my dividend payment. The Hamptons cottage that generated her income? Sold. The house you are standing in? I am executing the eviction because you never paid a single cent to the entity that held the mortgage. Me. The company you boasted about? Robert's legacy, which you lost when I reverted the shares. You were living in a bubble of my creation, and the moment you called me useless, I popped. Vanessa started crying, not the performative social media tears, but gut-wrenching sobs. Andre just stood there, his shame immense. He dropped to his knees, clutching my hand. "Please, Mother, I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll pay you back. I'll go back to school. Just please don't leave us homeless. We have nothing left." I yanked my hand away gently but firmly. "I heard you, Andre. And I saw you, Vanessa, when you posted that crying photo, attempting to use public shame against me. You both valued the money more than the person giving it. My retribution has nothing to do with charity and everything to do with dignity." "Your love was conditional," I stated, delivering the final verdict. "My repayment is too." I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. Cliffhanger. I placed the envelope on the mahogany table. "Open it," I commanded. "It contains the final terms of your freedom." Andre and Vanessa looked at the envelope as if it contained a poisonous snake. They hesitated, their hands trembling before Andre finally tore the thick paper open. He pulled out a lease agreement and a set of keys. There was no money. He looked up at me, confusion replacing fear. "What is this, Mother?" "It's a lease for a small, 2-bedroom apartment near the old industrial park," I explained, maintaining a distance. "It is modest. It is paid for by me for exactly 1 year. It is a shelter, not a home. And the conditions are simple, but non-negotiable." "Conditions?" Vanessa whispered, wiping her smudged mascara. "Yes. Both of you must get real jobs. Not brand deals, not commission-based possibilities. Hourly or salaried, steady employment. You must live within your means. You must use this year to establish a foundation of personal responsibility. At the end of the year, you must vacate this apartment and secure your own place, using only the money you earned. This is my last loan to you both, Andre. Not a loan of money, but a loan of dignity. They were too beaten to argue. They accepted the keys, knowing they had no other choice but the shelter system. As they left, heads bowed, dragging small suitcases. The only possessions I allowed them to take from the house. I watched them go. The triumph of my revenge was complete, yet a small, dull ache persisted in my chest. It hurt to see my son broken, even if I was the one who did the breaking. I started following their progress from a distance through Calvin, who received monthly reports. Andre had, surprisingly, swallowed his pride and found work as a salesman at a used car dealership. The initial shock had clearly forced him into survival mode. Vanessa predictably struggled more. She was used to luxury and found working retail deeply beneath her. But she needed the check, so she persisted, complaining bitterly on her now private social media to a handful of friends. My vengeance felt sweet, but its flavor was complex. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about demonstrating that their existence, devoid of personal effort, was fragile. They were learning the bitter taste of dependence, not on my wealth, but on their own ability to perform meaningless, exhausting labor. I realized then that the humiliation I'd endured had been replaced by a quiet, protective observation. I had put them through fire, and now I had to wait to see if they came out tempered or simply incinerated. One evening, after 3 long months of silence from them, a florist delivery arrived at my door. A stunning bouquet of white lilies. I signed for them, puzzled. They weren't from Andre. Cliffhanger. The card was simple, written in Vanessa's familiar, elegant script. Thank you for giving us a second chance. Vanessa's card made me suspicious, not sentimental. Second chance. Was this a calculated move, a softening of the target before she tried to worm her way back into my good graces? I am a woman who has spent her life reading market fluctuations, and I could spot a manipulative play a mile away. However, I didn't dismiss it. I saw it as a data point, a sign that perhaps necessity was breeding maturity. My relationship with Andre settled into a strained, almost professional equilibrium. Our phone calls were short, maybe once a week. They revolved strictly around his job. The shift was long, Mom. I sold 2 cars today. I had to handle a tough customer, but I closed the deal. There were no demands for money, no complaints about the small apartment. He was focused, disciplined, and sounded tired, a good tired. Vanessa, however, continued to be a work in progress. When I dared to ask Andre how she was handling her retail job, his sigh was heavy. She hates it. She complains that her feet hurt and that her boss is an idiot. But she goes. She knows the lease is up soon. I realized that my vengeance was, in some ways, incomplete. I had managed to break Andre's pride and force him into self-sufficiency. But Vanessa was still clinging to the entitlement of her past life, simply enduring the present. I thought about the future. I was tired of the coldness. The revenge was finished the day they dragged their bags out of the house. Now it was about healing. I needed a final separation from the anger, and that meant establishing boundaries that would last. I called Andre one evening just to chat, and I didn't ask about his sales targets. I asked about his day, truly. We talked about a basketball game, about the mundane, everyday things we hadn't discussed since he was a teenager. It was the first genuinely positive, non-transactional conversation we had shared in months. When we hung up, I felt a familiar warmth, a flicker of the love that had motivated my actions in the first place. I confessed to my emptiness. I miss my son, the man I raised, the boy who wasn't afraid to work hard. I don't miss the shell that money created. As the end of the lease loomed, the pressure mounted. The apartment provided by me was the only thing preventing them from being truly adrift. I knew their survival depended on the next conversation. I had to ensure they understood that the assistance, this last loan of dignity, was ending, and the foundation they built had to hold. Cliffhanger. The year was almost over. They had to be out. I decided to make one final, crucial visit to assess if my lesson had actually stuck, or if I had to watch them fall again. The small, beige apartment felt cramped, almost suffocating, compared to the lavish Toronto home. When I walked in for our final meeting, there was a palpable sense of anxiety, but also of cleanliness and order, a modest pride in their tiny space. Andre and Vanessa were waiting for me, both looking far less polished, but far more substantial. Andre's hands were rough from the manual labor of detailing cars, and Vanessa's clothes were functional, not fashionable. The lease expires tomorrow, I stated, getting straight to the point. Have you made arrangements? Andre took a deep breath, and I noticed the new confidence in his shoulders. Yes, Mother. We found a place. It's a small place near my dealership. It's cheap, and we paid the first and last month's rent ourselves. We signed the lease yesterday. We did it all ourselves, without any help. He emphasized the last phrase, and a genuine, unforced smile touched his lips. Vanessa spoke, and her voice was steady, free of the whine I had grown used to. I wanted to apologize, Marjorie. Not because you took the money, but for what I said and what I thought. I didn't know what it meant to earn value. I just thought money was value. I was wrong. I'm sorry. It was the first truly honest and comprehensive apology I had ever received from her. It was worth more than any lost stock certificate. I looked at both of them, seeing, finally, a glimpse of the responsible adults they should have been all along. The coldness in my heart began to thaw, replaced by a sense of satisfaction. I had endured the humiliation, executed the vengeance, and achieved the desired outcome. I am pleased, I admitted. You proved you could survive, and more importantly, you proved you could build something from the ground up. I then stood up, preparing to leave. They looked at me expectantly, perhaps hoping for a final, grand gesture, a check, a gift, an embrace. I gave them none of it. I looked at Andre, my son, who now had the calluses of a working man. You said I was useless without money, I concluded, looking him straight in the eye. And in turn, I made you feel useless with it. The lesson is learned and the debt is settled. You will never receive a dime from me again for your upkeep. You are independent now. You are free. I paused, letting the finality sink in. Now, I said, the final words of my confession ringing with a mixture of justice and mercy. You will learn the value of what I gave. I extended my hand to him, not for a hug, not for a motherly touch, but for a firm, equal handshake. He took it, and the gesture reset our relationship forever. From parent/dependent to two independent adults connected by blood, but separated by boundaries. He smiled, a humble, genuine smile, finally proud of the life he was earning, not the one I was purchasing for him. I walked out of the apartment, knowing my justice was complete. I had achieved a conclusive, clean break. The relationship was not repaired with unconditional love, but redefined by respect, ensuring that the problem of entitlement would never resurface. My vengeance wasn't about watching them fall to their deaths. It was about forcing them to fly. And they were flying now, entirely on their own fuel. My story was over.